Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in today. We all like to think we know exactly who we can count on when life gets tough. But sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones who leave us standing alone in the dark. And the people we barely know are the ones who pull us through. Today, I'm sharing the story of Elena, a woman who faced the ultimate betrayal on the night her son was born, only to discover a strength she never knew she had. This is a story about broken promises, hidden truths, and the beautiful, unexpected ways we rebuild our lives. Let's dive in. It was exactly 2:15 in the morning when my world shifted. I stood at the edge of our mattress, feeling the cold dampness soak through my nightgown. My water had broken. Panic and excitement battled in my chest as I reached out, shaking David's shoulder. "David, wake up. The baby is coming right now." He didn't bolt upright. He didn't even open his eyes. Instead, he pulled the heavy quilt tighter over his shoulders, his voice muffled. "Elena, please. I have the Harrison presentation at 9 a.m. Call an ambulance." For a long, agonizing moment, I stood there frozen. The only light in the room was the sharp blue glare from his smartphone charging on the nightstand. The air conditioner hummed its usual, indifferent tune. Outside, a neighbor's automated sprinkler clicked against the grass. And there I was, married to this man for over a decade, bracing my hand against my lower back, staring at a stranger. "David," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Listen to me. My water broke." He cracked one eye open, checking his glowing phone screen. "I heard you, Elena. But I've been pulling 80-hour weeks for this account. If I show up exhausted, we lose the entire regional contract." A sharp, crushing wave of pain tightened across my abdomen. I gripped the edge of the wooden dresser, squeezing my eyes shut until the contraction passed. "I need you to take me to the hospital. Please." He rubbed his face in deep irritation, groaning as if I had disturbed him over a dripping faucet. "You've had months to prepare a backup plan for this," he sighed, turning his back to me. "Call 911 if it's an emergency." He actually rolled back over. "I wish I could tell you I screamed. I wish I could say I threw something. But I didn't. I just stood in the dark, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing return, waiting out the next wave of pain. My name is Elena Vance. At the time, I was 44 years old, working as an elementary school librarian in Zionsville, Indiana. My entire life had been built around order. I cataloged books, color-coded permission slips, and organized reading lists months in advance. I genuinely believed that if you plan well enough, you can manage any crisis. That belief was the only thing that kept me moving through 7 grueling years of fertility treatments, countless hormone injections, and 2 devastating miscarriages that still made my chest tight to think about. By the time I conceived our son through our final, exhausting round of IVF, I was terrified. I didn't buy a single onesie until the 3rd trimester. My obstetrician classified it as a high-risk pregnancy, due to my age and blood pressure. To me, it felt like 9 months of holding my breath. David knew every bit of that fear. Just the afternoon before, he had stood next to me in the freshly painted nursery, his hand resting gently on my stomach, asking me to smile for a photo. 10 minutes later, he posted it online with the caption, "Counting down the minutes to meet my little boy. #blessed #future dad." The comments flooded in instantly. "You two will be perfect parents. David is going to be such a dedicated father." But the moment he unlocked his phone, he looked at the nursing glider chair I had picked out. "Did we really need the premium model? It's just a chair, Elena." "It was on sale, and my back has been killing me," I replied softly. He just shook his head. "We don't need top-of-the-line everything just because we waited a long time." That was the reality of David. Generous and warm in front of a camera lens, deeply resentful in private. I had noticed the shift over the past year, but I kept making excuses. He was stressed about money. He was terrified of becoming a first-time father at 46. I was an expert at finding logical explanations for completely unacceptable behavior. At 2:20 a.m., I dialed 911 from the hallway floor. When the dispatcher asked if my partner was home, I looked back at the closed bedroom door. "Yes," I whispered. "Is he able to drive you to the nearest emergency room?" "No. Primer lit. He has a critical work meeting in the morning." There was a heavy pause on the line. Just a few seconds. But it was long enough for the reality of my words to sting. The dispatcher gently instructed me to unlock the front door and sit down. I managed to pull on a pair of oversized sweatpants and a school sweatshirt. Dragging my pre-packed hospital bag down the stairs felt like climbing a mountain. When I swung the front door open, I saw a flashlight cutting through the morning mist. It was Clara Ramos, the 68-year-old widow who lived directly across the street. Clara suffered from severe arthritis and usually moved with agonizing slowness. But that morning, she was practically running across the asphalt. "Elena," she called out, catching her breath. I saw the porch light. "What's wrong?" "The baby is coming," I gasped, leaning against the doorframe. Clara looked past me into the dark, quiet house. "Where is David?" I couldn't bring myself to look her in the eye. Clara's expression instantly shifted from confusion to pure fury. "He's upstairs, isn't he?" She didn't wait for an answer. She marched onto the porch, took the heavy bag from my trembling hand, and put her arm around my waist. "Lean on me. We're going." "Clara, your knees." "My knees have been complaining since the 90s, Elena. They can complain in the waiting room." The paramedics arrived 2 minutes later. As they hoisted me into the back of the ambulance, Clara climbed right in behind them without asking anyone's permission. She hadn't even grabbed her purse and was wearing her indoor house slippers, but she held my hand so tightly my knuckles turned white all the way to the hospital. 3 hours into my labor, things took a dangerous turn. My son's heart rate plummeted. In an instant, the quiet delivery room flooded with medical staff. Voices blurred. A clipboard was pushed into my hands to sign an emergency waiver. I remember the blinding, sterile lights of the operating room, the cold snap of the blood pressure cuff, and Clara's worried face fading away as the double doors swung shut. David still hadn't picked up a single one of my calls. Leo was born via emergency C-section at 6:41 a.m., weighing exactly 6 pounds, 8 ounces. When the doctor lifted him over the sterile drape, he was bright red, completely furious, and sporting a thick head of jet black hair. His first cry was a tiny squeak, followed by a roaring, healthy wail. "Look at that fighter," the surgical nurse smiled, holding him close to my face. I broke down, laughing and sobbing all at once. Because of sudden blood loss, my surgery took longer than expected. By the time they wheeled me into the recovery ward, I was shivering violently under 3 warmed blankets. Clara was sitting right there in an uncomfortable plastic chair, keeping watch with my phone in her lap. "Did David call?" I whispered through chattering teeth. Clara looked down at her lap, her voice dropping. "No, sweetheart. Not yet." It wasn't until 12:47 that afternoon that my phone finally buzzed. It was a text message from David. 6 words. "Did everything go okay with it?" No phone call. No request to speak with my doctor. No questions about his son's health, my surgery, or what room we were in. Just a cold, administrative check-in. A veteran nurse named Evelyn, who was adjusting my 4-line, saw me staring blankly at the screen. She looked at the text, then glanced over at Clara, who had drifted off to sleep with her hands resting on her swollen knees. Evelyn patted my arm gently. "Honey, I've worked the graveyard shift in maternity for 30 years. People will always find a convenient excuse to stay away when things get hard. But the person in that hospital bed never, ever forgets who actually showed up." Looking down at Leo, whose tiny fingers were wrapped around my thumb, a cold clarity washed over me. For years, I had been terrified of losing my marriage. But sitting in that hospital bed, I realized David had checked out of our life together a long time ago. I was just the last one to admit it. A week later, I brought Leo home. David had spent the entire week claiming he was wrapped up in post-presentation client dinners and couldn't make the trip to the hospital. That afternoon, he knocked loudly on the locked bedroom door. "Elena, unlock the door," he called out. "My mother keeps demanding updates, and I want to see my son." I opened the door just a few inches, blocking the entryway. "Whose son, David?" David blinked, completely taken aback, as if I were speaking a foreign language. "What do you mean, whose son?" "I'm talking about Leo." "Oh, Leo?" I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "The baby you left me to deliver via emergency surgery while you slept out the night?" The hallway fell dead silent. Behind me, the white noise machine hummed softly next to the crib. Clara was sitting in the corner armchair, quietly folding baby blankets. She didn't say a word, but her eyes were locked on David. David lowered his voice, his jaw tightening. "You are being completely irrational. I told you I had the Harrison account meeting. I sent you a text." 6 words, David. You sent a 6-word text. He brushed his hand through his hair, clearly annoyed that I wasn't dropping the subject. "Look, can I come into my own room or not?" It was almost surreal. He was standing there in a pristine custom suit, expensive leather shoes, looking like a corporate executive stopping by to audit a warehouse. There was no hospital band on his wrist, no shadows under his eyes, no physical evidence that his life had changed at all in the last 7 days. "Why are you actually here right now?" I asked. "I told you," he muttered, shifting his weight. "People at the firm are asking questions. My mom wants photos for the family group chat." There it was. Not "how are you healing?" Not "I want to hold my boy." Just branding. Public relations. Clara stopped folding the blanket. David finally noticed her sitting there and scowled. "Why is the neighbor still in our house?" "Because she drove me to the hospital while you slept," I said. "And she's been helping me survive the week." "I'm perfectly capable of helping with my own child," David snapped. Clara looked up, her voice sharp as glass. "You had an entire week to demonstrate that capability, young man." David's face flushed a deep, angry red. "This is a private family matter, Clara. You need to leave." Clara stood up slowly, bracing her hands on her cane. "It stopped being a private matter the second your wife had to call an emergency vehicle, because you refused to get out of bed." I expected David to lose his temper, but instead he looked terrified that the neighbors might hear. He cared so deeply about his corporate image, about looking like a good man. I stepped back, opening the door a fraction wider. "You have 10 minutes, I told him. Wash your hands." He rolled his eyes, marching into the guest bathroom. A moment later, he walked into the nursery and stood over the bassinet. Leo was sound asleep, wearing a simple cotton onesie, making tiny movements with his mouth. David stared down at him, his expression completely blank. "He looks tiny," David muttered. "I thought he was full term." "He was 3 weeks early, David. You'd know that if you had spoken to the neonatologist." He ignored the comment, reaching down to lift Leo. But he held him awkwardly, pushing the baby away from his chest like a fragile, inconvenient package he was afraid of dropping. "Support his head," I commanded. "I am supporting it," he snapped back, visibly irritated. Leo let out a soft cry, his tiny face wrinkling in discomfort. David immediately panicked, trying to hand him back to me. "I think he's hungry. Take him." "He ate 15 minutes ago," I said, refusing to take him. "He just wants to be held properly." Instead of comforting his son, David pulled his smartphone out with his free hand. He extended his arm, angling the screen so his own face took up the entire frame, and snapped a quick selfie. "Can you get a shot of us together?" he asked, looking at me. "No." He turned his gaze to Clara. She didn't even look up from her folding. "I don't do public relations work, David." Furious, David checked his designer watch. "Look, I have a dinner with the regional executives downtown. I have to go." "Of course you do," I said. He paused at the doorway, looking back with a cold expression. "You need to stop punishing me for one bad call, Elena. It's getting old." I looked down at Leo, who immediately calmed down the moment I held him against my skin. "That wasn't a bad call, David. That was a choice." That evening, as I was sterilizing bottles in the kitchen, my phone lit up with a notification. David had posted the selfie. The caption read, "My entire universe in one picture. Nothing matters more than family." Within an hour, it had hundreds of likes. His mother had commented, "So proud of my dedicated boy." I turned the screen face down on the counter. My actual reality wasn't polished for social media. My surgical incision burned with every step I took. My ankles were so swollen I could barely fit into slippers. I was sleeping in fragmented, 40-minute windows. But in the quiet hours of that night, I realized I was no longer fighting to save a marriage. I was fighting to protect my son. 2 weeks later, I tried to order Leo's special formula online using our joint household debit card. The transaction was instantly declined. I tried again, thinking it was a typo. Declined. When I called David at his office, he sounded completely unbothered. It's probably just a banking glitch. Use your personal account. I'll look into it tomorrow. I didn't wait for tomorrow. That night, after Leo finally drifted off to sleep, I logged into our primary financial portals. What I found made my blood run cold. Our shared credit cards were completely maxed out. There were thousands of dollars in unexplained charges. High-end dinners in Chicago, luxury boutique hotels in downtown Indianapolis, and a massive charge at a designer jewelry store just 3 days before I went into labor. At first, I prayed our identity had been stolen. But then I noticed the specific dates. On the weekend of the Chicago hotel charge, David had told me he was at a mandatory corporate retreat in Louisville. As a librarian, I didn't know how to wage a loud war. But I did know how to research, catalog, and organize. I opened a blank digital spreadsheet. I created columns: date, location, amount, David's alibi. By 1 a.m., I had mapped out 6 solid months of systematic deception. Suddenly, an old family iPad sitting on the kitchen charging dock lit up with a notification. It was synced to an old cloud account David had completely forgotten about. A message popped up from a contact saved only as K. Shaw. The text read, "Don't worry about it. Once the baby arrives, Elena will be way too exhausted to notice where you're spending your time." My hands shook as I opened the full message thread. It was a digital archive of a 2-year affair. Hotel booking confirmations, photos of the jewelry he had bought her, and complaints about my pregnancy. But it was one specific text from David that broke something permanent inside me. "She won't leave me now. She worked too hard for this baby. Motherhood has her trapped." He hadn't just betrayed our marriage vows. He had calculated my vulnerability. He counted on my exhaustion to keep me silent. I closed the laptop, walked into the dark laundry room, closed the door, and dialed a prominent local family attorney named Evelyn Vance's recommendation. Margaret Vance. When Margaret answered, my voice was trembling, but my resolve was solid. "I don't want a dramatic legal war, Ms. Vance," I told her. "I just want to ensure my son never grows up thinking love means accepting abuse." Margaret Vance's office was quiet, organized, and entirely unintimidating. She spent nearly an hour reviewing my organized binder of financial records and text printouts. When she finally looked up, her expression was incredibly serious. "Elena, Indiana is a no-fault state. The family courts do not punish a spouse emotionally for infidelity. What the judge cares about is hard evidence. Financial dissipation of marital assets, parental hiding of funds, and actual day-to-day involvement with the child." She tapped my spreadsheet. "This isn't just an affair diary. This is a record of marital fraud." Over the next 2 weeks, we officially filed for divorce. Margaret moved quickly, securing a temporary order for primary physical custody, and freezing our marital accounts so David couldn't empty the remaining funds. David received the legal summons at his corporate office on a Thursday afternoon. He called my phone exactly 12 minutes later, completely hysterical. "Are you out of your mind? You hired a lawyer? You didn't even give me a chance to explain." "I gave you over a decade, David," I replied. That evening, he showed up at my doorstep unannounced, carrying heavy bags of organic groceries, premium baby formula, and high-end diapers. If a casual observer had walked past, they would have thought he was husband of the year. "I thought I'd bring dinner," he said, trying to push past me with a forced smile. "We don't need to rush this legal nonsense. My annual corporate performance bonus clears in 3 months. That money belongs to all of us. Let's just wait until bonus season is over." I looked at him, completely disgusted. Even now, facing the end of his family, his primary concern was protecting his payout. "Is Kendra Shaw joining us for dinner, David?" I asked quietly. His face drained of color instantly. I don't know who that is." I walked into the kitchen, brought out the printed copies of the cloud messages, and handed them to him. He grabbed the papers, his hands trembling. "This is an invasion of my privacy. And leaving me alone in a puddle of water to deliver our high-risk child was an invasion of my life." I shot back. He scrambled for an excuse, his voice cracking. Elena, I love you. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. You were different during the pregnancy. You were so emotional, you stopped focusing on us. No, David, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I didn't stop caring about us. I just stopped being convenient for you. But the real shockwave hit 3 days later. While reviewing the corporate alibis David had given me, Margaret discovered that several of the luxury hotel stays and boutique jewelry purchases had been submitted to his firm as legitimate corporate expenses. He had categorized a diamond bracelet for his mistress as a client appreciation gift, and a weekend resort stay as a regional strategy conference. David had been stealing from his own employers to fund his double life. When the temporary custody hearing arrived, David showed up in a brand new custom suit, flanked by his mother and a very uncomfortable-looking Kendra Shaw. His high-priced attorney stood up, painting a picture of a dedicated, hard-working executive whose career demands were being weaponized against him by an emotionally unstable wife. Margaret didn't argue. She didn't yell. She simply presented the cold, hard facts. She submitted the 911 call timestamped at 2:20 a.m., the ambulance transport logs, the hospital admission records showing David never stepped foot in the building, my detailed caregiving log, pediatric records, and finally, the certified financial audit showing his systematic misuse of marital funds. Then Clara took the stand. When David's lawyer tried to suggest that David might have simply slept through the commotion, Clara looked the attorney dead in the eye. I could hear the man snoring through the open second-story window while the paramedics were wheeling his wife down the driveway, Clara testified. The courtroom fell completely silent. During a brief recess, David's phone rang. He stepped into the corridor, and when he walked back into the courtroom 5 minutes later, his face was completely hollow. His firm had completed an immediate internal investigation into his expense reports. He had been suspended indefinitely pending immediate termination for corporate fraud. Kendra Shaw stood up slowly, looked at David with utter contempt, picked up her designer purse, and walked out of the courtroom alone. The judge's ruling was decisive. I was granted primary physical custody of Leo, child support guidelines were established, and David was ordered to complete mandatory court-supervised parenting and infant safety classes before he could even request overnight visits. Today, Leo is thriving, growing up surrounded by a village of people who truly love him, including his grandmother, his incredible mother Elena, and the neighbor across the street, Clara, who proved that family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when the lights go out. David learned the hard way that you can't curate a life on social media when your real actions are hollow. If this story reminded you of an unsung hero in your own life, someone who stood by you during your darkest season, take a moment to appreciate them today. And if you're currently rebuilding your life piece by piece, remember, order can be restored, truth wins, and you are stronger than you think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Until next time.